We've got some fresh new young talent doing some things that I know you haven't heard before.
1, 2, 3, listen.
Welcome to Finances, your home for all things financial, investment, money and lifestyle. Hosted and curated by the very talented team of certified financial planners, Burke Financial Partners. This is the Finances Podcast. I am Jay Burke, your usual host. I have a good friend of mine joining us today, client Tam Shiels. Welcome to the Finances Podcast. How you been?
I'm great, Jay. I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm very...
You were impressed by the setup too, weren't you?
I'm very impressed by the setup. I don't mean just your setup, Jay, but I mean the setup. When I walked in and I saw the mic set up, I went, this guy's fair dinkum.
Cameras as well, everything.
The whole kit and caboodle.
Now, I've felt a little bit rigid with some of my previous podcasts. Right. We've been talking about boring subjects, and most of my guests, like Peter and Ben, they're pretty boring, like they're in the finance industry.
Sleepers, and you know how I feel about that.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit more upbeat and loose today, having you on the podcast. Now, I always like to start with a bit of an origin story, but let's start with the origin story of how you and I met. I can't even remember where it was. Can you?
No.
That's a question without notice. Sorry.
I would have met you through your wife, Kari, who I met through our network marketing businesses. So I would have met Kari at some point, loved her immediately. Then met you. And
how long have we known each other for?
I reckon nearly 9 years.
Okay.
Have to be. Yeah. Be about 9 years. Wasn't long after I'd started my business that I met Kari, because we were all part of the same, I suppose came under the same banner, same team. I don't remember where I met you. I don't actually remember where I met Kari. Don't tell.
I must have made a real impression on you that first time.
Yeah. Don't tell Kari. I don't remember where I met her. But don't remember. I just remember that straight away I was mates with Kari. I think I sort of I was hanging around her a lot.
Like a puppy dog.
Yeah, like a puppy dog, yeah. It's always behind her, like all photos and stuff that we have from like way back then. She's like, you're like a creepy stalker.
That was when she was cool with only 2 kids.
Totally. I know you had 3 kids then.
3.
Yeah.
Okay.
But only I think Alfie would have been really little.
Yeah, he would have been.
He was a baby.
3. Yeah, it would have been 3.
He was little. So we would catch up then, and then I met you, and I think it was just the same. And
love at first sight.
Yep. And I'm not going to say that I like you more than Kari, but
you do.
I do. I said it.
All right, let's because we couldn't nail an origin story there. Let's go back a little bit further to where'd you grow up? What's your family history? And how did you end up where you are today, living down in Barwon Head? So let's go way back to where you're from.
I'm very posh now. Shows the extreme transition from country bogan girl to living in Barwon.
Remember, you're not allowed to say journey today.
I know. I went to say it and I changed to transition.
Transition.
Yeah, I like transition. Yeah,
that's been co-opted as well recently. Okay. But anyway.
Oh, whatever. Anyway.
So whatever you like, Tammy.
So I grew up in Tatura, northeastern Victoria, just a little country town outside of Shep. I always say Shepparton when someone asks me where I'm from, because no one knows where Tad is.
Well, all of our Shepparton clients will be interested to know that you'd be very well known in the Golden Valley region.
Probably for not things that I'm proud of. Yeah, grew up there. To be honest, as soon as I was old enough to get out, I did.
How old was that?
About 17, 18. I moved out of the small town. I sort of felt like I wanted to see the world. I always sort of felt a little bit claustrophobic, and I think I always felt that people have a perception of who you are when you're in a small place like that, and that perception of you stays as it is forever. So even I think today, if I was to go back there, people would still see me as Tam from Tat from right back then. They don't know anything about my journey. There you go. Or where I am today, what I'm doing.
Were you on a dairy farm, or did you just...
No, we lived in town. Dad's a panel beater, had his own business as a panel beater. Mum was a stay-at-home mum, but once my youngest brother, I'm the eldest of 3, got 2 younger brothers, and I'm the boss. And they, as soon as my youngest brother started going to school, Mum got herself a part-time job. Mum was always somebody who always worked, always had an income, always... always found it very important to have our own financial independence.
You seem as though you've a bit of that's rubbed off on you, I'd suggest, Tammy.
Yes, that I think for me, particularly what I'll talk about over the next little while is I'm really passionate about women knowing what their bank account is. There are a lot of people that I speak to through what I'm doing now that just really don't know anything. And I mean, Jay, I'm first to admit to you, and you know this, I hate really talking about, I guess, it bores the crap out of me, like it really does. But I've been I suppose, I don't need to know everything about it, but I also have somebody else that's a professional who's you in that space that can give me advice about what I should do in regards to it. So I'm not good at everything. I'm actually good at everything. I'm not great at everything. And so it's not something that interests me, so I don't spend time doing it. But what I do is I have people around me who are really good at it. So yeah, I think that's important. But I'm knowledgeable now. I've always been knowledgeable about, having my own income. I've always worked, had my own money, not being great at managing money, but certainly conscious that I, particularly when I went through my separation divorce, which I'll get into in a minute, that I had the right plan in place around that. And I knew I did not have the tools to be able to set that up. I had to get someone else to help me, which was you. Yeah.
Obviously, we're coming up. There's some method behind the origin story for yourself, because it leads to a couple of fairly significant life events for you, which, from a planning point of view, very relevant, and things that I've been a part of, been able to help you with over I was going to say your journey. But let's, before we get to those, let's keep the timeline ticking.
Yep.
So you left Tatura when you were 17. Where did you go then?
I moved up with a few mates to Cairns.
To Cairns,
yeah.
Okay.
Actually, my boyfriend at the time, he had already just moved up there with a couple of mates, and so I got on a Greyhound bus and spent a beautiful 3-day journey up to Cairns.
Did you have a plan, or you just
just turned up?
Ticket and go.
So packed up what I had, went up there with a backpack and another bag, I think.
So did you finish school?
Yep, finished year 12.
In Tatura?
Yep. So I went to Marupna Secondary College. They called it Marupna Secondary College after they tried to fancy it up. But truth be known, there was a kid who burnt down the whole admin building on the last day of my year 12 exam. So it wasn't. It was actually very interesting. I went to a Catholic primary school, and then Mum and Dad gave me the option whether to go to a Catholic high school or a public high school. I chose public, mainly because it had great IT. It had much better IT, and it had a really good sports program, which was things that's what I was interested in. So
when you say IT, infotech?
Infotech. Back then, it was...
Didn't know computers existed back then, Tam.
It wasn't that long ago, Jay. They were big computers, about the same size as this table. But that's what I chose. So that was I went from being a really naive young kid in a Catholic school in a small town to an environment that had a totally different socioeconomic level, lots of kids who were really living on benefits, lots of kids who were dropping out of school very early.
Back then, was Tatura, Goulburn Valley still fairly heavy population of migrants?
Yes.
Yep.
And particularly Marupna, where it was placed, so it was sort of a bit of no man's land, and it was, it was the total opposite to what I'd grown up to. So I think it's put me in good stead moving forward in life, because I'm quite dynamic. I can get along with pretty much anyone. Nothing worries me too much when it comes to being around people, but I'm very good at picking up energies of things that might be a dangerous environment or it was totally different to what I'd known, but I loved it. I loved the diversity of the people that I got to hang out with. Yeah,
that the exposure to a different environment, giving you that sort of radar, like you mentioned, like allows you to sort of see what's going on in the world more broadly, rather than living in this tiny little bubble.
Yeah. And so once I left high school, I think I got into. I'm going to be honest with you. I was drunk at my year 12 English exam, so I didn't didn't even care, but passed. So I was always a really good student.
Was it in the morning or was it at night?
I don't know. It was mid-afternoon maybe.
Wow.
So I was that kid that I was always smart enough to get by just doing what I had to do, but wasn't striving. And I think probably, if I'm going to be really honest about it, I don't think I felt like I was going to be able to go to university because my parents maybe weren't. I didn't feel that they were in a financial situation to maybe even put me through university.
So had you thought maybe I'd like to go to uni, but mum and dad I don't think you're going to be able to pay for it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely remember that being a thought process back then. Look, there were a lot of wealthy kids that went to the school that I went to, farming community all around as well, a lot of wealthy families, old money. But then, of course, like I said, there was kids that dropped out of school at 13 and 14, had kids of their own. And it was just, this very different sort of exposure to life and what you want to do. So in saying that, I didn't really know what I wanted to do either. And I hated being pigeonholed into doing one thing. So when I finished year 12, I went and cleaned some houses for some people. I actually packed tomatoes out did some fruit picking.
As you do in the Golden Valley.
As you do in the Golden Valley. Packed tomatoes, 40 degrees in a tin shed, packing tomatoes. It just gave me a really good insight as like, do you know what, this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. But it also, I suppose it was a way of earning an income, and I knew I had to make money. I was never going to ask mum and dad. It was never in a situation where I expected my parents to pay for anything.
Mm. It's kind of important. I'm thinking about Willow, who, my eldest, working at McDonald's, saying, "Hey, Dad, I don't really like this." And I go, "Yeah, it's kind of good to do that work that you don't like and realise that actually I don't want to be doing this for the rest of my life."
Yep.
So uni wasn't on for you.
No.
You jumped on the bus. You went to Cairns with some friends. How long were you in Cairns for?
I was up there for a couple of years, got myself a job in a roofing business.
Were you climbing around in small spaces in a roof?
No, I was the admin. Funnily enough, I ended up being sort of like the trust accountant and worked with the money and the finances part of things for somebody else's business. It was good. I was up there for a couple of years. Boyfriend.
They obviously didn't ask you whether you enjoyed finance when they gave you that role.
I just, you know what? I think it was. I don't know if it's the same now because I'm not in the position, but I've always found that if you need work, you can find it. And I wasn't fussy about what I did. I was like, I need a job. I'll go get a job. And I've sort of always been like that. It didn't really matter what the environment was at the time. I just need to make money, so this is what I'll do. And I loved it. I learned a lot in that. Role, and they were fantastic. I actually broke up with my boyfriend when I was living up there after about 18 months. And the boss said to me, "Well, how are you going to get around? You don't have a car." And I was like, "I don't know yet. I'll get a bike." And he said, "You can have one of the company cars." So here I was like loving life. I was
pimping it in the boss's car.
They gave me a company car. I was 20. I was getting around in Cairns. I think I started to date one of the roof plumbers. I was having a great time for a while. and then I hadn't seen mum and dad for 2 years because they hadn't been able to come up and visit me. So I ended up flying home. I decided that's it, chapter over. And so got back to Shepparton. Needed to get a job. Actually got a job as a debt collector for a place called Receivables Management Group, which had great fun. Like for part of it, I mean, it was an awful job. You had to ring old ladies for like $3 and $5 from Golden Valley Health that they hadn't paid their account, and send the sheriff out and do all that sort of stuff, which wasn't great, but it was a job. But the thing was, it was right next door to LJ Hooker in Shepparton at that point. And when a job came up there for a trust accountant, I went for the job and got it. So
another job in finance.
Another job in finance. Can you believe it? Yeah. So I was a trust accountant for LJ Hooker. I reckon I was probably stayed for about 12 months. Had my 21st when I lived in Shep. Got involved in the footy netball club, did all the things. My life in terms of health looked very different back then. Drank a lot, smoked darts, like total different to what I am now.
A little thicker.
You've seen the photos.
I have.
You've seen the wraparounds. But still played sport, was still sort of active. And then it came to a point, one day I just remember sitting in LJ Hooker, which was directly across the road from the Sherborne nightclub, which was the place that you'd go on a Saturday night in Shep. And I'm looking at it and I thought, I don't want my life to be this on the weekend and this during the week. I'm out. So again, rummaged through the paper. I don't think it was even online back then. Got the Herald Sun. Found myself a job in Albert Park. In
the Big Smoke.
In the Big Smoke.
Had you been to Melbourne?
I'd been to Melbourne before, yeah. So I packed up my day with Lanos Packed up my Daewoo Lanos, all my worldly possessions, got a job as a receptionist at a little law firm in Albert Park and loved it. Moved in with a friend's mate, like just through word of mouth. Hadn't met him before. He was my roommate. Moved into Glen Iris, beautiful part of Melbourne. Got another job working in a takeaway shop there, a noodle place. He was like literally the worst boss in the whole world, but it paid for my Friday nights at the Elephant and the Wheelbarrow. Yeah. And had fun. So while I was there again, I thought, okay, well, I'm in Melbourne now. I'm earning money, but is this really what I want to do? And I thought I can get back. I'd been pretty good in the real estate thing. I love the energy of real estate. I love that sort of, fast paced and I like the marketing and all that side. So I ended up going for a job in Kensington in Rendina Real Estate, which back then...
Lou Rendina?
Louis was my first boss in real estate in Melbourne. Got a job for Lou. And with Lou was probably about 25 then, and he was making some big waves in Melbourne.
Have we talked about the connection between Lou before? Have we talked about Lou before? Yeah,
no.
We've never spoken about...
I don't think we've ever spoken about Lou.
Okay. Because I think Lou was originally from...
He's from Lara.
Lara, Geelong. I think he might have actually gone to Crow North High School. Or maybe I've got that wrong, Flinders Peak. But
no, he might have,
Yeah, so Peter,
yes.
My dad, I believe was one of Lou's teachers at school.
Oh, God.
Yeah. So
there you go.
Small world.
It is a small world. So he was like really making some waves in Melbourne. He was this up and coming, really ballsy real estate agent, young fella, making huge profit, selling like with huge commission. Won't go into it too much. I don't know about the legalities about Lou Rendina, but he was great. It was a great environment. Met loads of great people. Like everyone was young and it was fast paced and great fun. So worked there, then met someone new who lived on the other side of the city. So then I ended up getting a job in real estate at another place called Gary Peer Real Estate, which has been around for a very long time. It was predominantly a Jewish real estate firm, and I became their trust accountant there.
Jeez, another job in finance. For someone who doesn't like, maybe you've just got sick of finance over your working career.
Yeah. Do you know what? Maybe it's because I was very good at dealing with other people's finances. I couldn't be bothered when it came to my own.
Yeah.
So, went and worked for Gary. They were great. They taught me a lot about money. That community, how they worked, and really clever, really business savvy, marketing, and that was extraordinary. So I worked for them for a little while, and then one day, just out of the blue, someone said to me, it was actually my boss at the time, Justine, who's now head of Goff Recruitment in Melbourne. She actually said to me, Virgin Blues launched in Melbourne. Maybe you should go for a job there, and took the piss a bit because I'm 5 foot tall. No taller. And she said, I wonder if you can get a job there, like you're not tall enough. So that very next week I got myself an interview at the group interview for Virgin Blue, and I went and I got the job. So I left.
You're a Virgin girl.
I was a Virgin girl, yeah. Just did it, loved it.
Domestic or international?
Domestic.
Yep.
Had all the benefits of international, but didn't actually do a lot of international travel when I was there, but I made a lot of great friends.
So what age were you?
I would have been 25.
Yep.
Yeah, 25 at that stage. It was a great experience, probably not great in terms of health-wise. Health-wise, it was a lot of drinking, a lot of partying, a lot of, my favourite thing to do was have a Diet Coke and a smoke as soon as I finished my shift. It was just totally different to now, but it was a great lifestyle. Like I'd recommend it for any young person that wants to travel and see the world, and it gave me a lot of great life skills as well.
So, you mentioned the kids before, Darcy, Asher, and Finn.
Mm-hmm.
When did you start to settle down? When did this this crazy young Golden Valley girl become a virgin air hostess? When did she find love and settle down? Yeah,
so I met who would be my husband. I met him when I was 27.
Okay,
so a couple of years
later.
Yep. Just 27, I think. And we started dating, and then it came to the point where I sort of didn't want to be away all the time anymore, wanted to be home more. We were living together. We actually lived together from the moment we met, because I was actually living with his flatmate. As he was, his brother was my flatmate at the time, and he'd moved down from the Sunshine Coast, needed somewhere to stay, so he moved in with us. So that was it. We met, we started dating, and 2 years later, I fell pregnant with who would be my first son, Finn. Had Finn when I was 30. We got married almost a year after that, it was just a year after that. So I had Finn in 2008, got married in 2009. And then after that, had my second son, Asher, who was born in 2010. And then I had my daughter, Darcy, who was born in 2012.
So how old were you when Asher was born?
I would have been 32. And then had Darcy when I was 34.
34.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So at this time, and we might have touched on it earlier, but at this time, how's your relationship going? Is everything going swimmingly? Is family life good for you? Or was there some signs that this is probably not what you wanted?
Okay, so I recognised when I had my second son that it wasn't a relationship I wanted to be in, but it wasn't something I was saying out loud to anybody. I knew I wasn't happy. We owned our own businesses, my husband's business, which I was working in, helping him with the admin side of things and the money side of the finance side of things. Yeah, again, here we go again. There seems to be a pattern, Jay, I hadn't thought about before. But
it's a fairly strong pattern too. I can see why you're a jack of all things finance.
Yeah. And I could see, well, after working with him, we worked very differently. So I liked to pay bills. He didn't. It was a very strong cash run business. I like to have I was a trust accountant. I like to know when the money's coming, how much is owed, where it's going to, what's being spent on. I understood business as though it's not just the cash you have in your pocket with overheads. I really understood that well. He didn't so much. So whilst he was very good at making income, he was not good at all at managing it. And that caused a lot of stress. So after a couple of years, I stepped away from the business. We ended up getting a bookkeeper at the time who was a friend of ours to step in, and he said, I'll be able to handle it all. Leave it to me. And it was around about that same time, actually, when Asher was born, Asher was born in 2010. I had a life-altering moment. One of my very best friends died suddenly, and it was then I realised that I'm not happy, but I sort of didn't know what to do. And I didn't want to admit it. We'd bought a block of land. We were building a house. Had 2 kids. I was ticking all those boxes.
So how old were the kids at this point when you had that realisation? You lost your friend and thought, hey, life's short. This is not what I want.
They were 2 and a baby. I had 2 of them at that stage. They were 2 and brand new. But I stayed. And I just sort of thought, okay, well, what can I do to sort of make things better or ignore them? So I got busy planning the house, built the house, got busy decorating the house, got busy buying shit at Country Road no one needs. I got busy got busy being busy. Ended up studying at that time and had Darcy 2 years after that. So I had Darcy in 2012. I remember sitting at my kitchen table and studying to be a fitness instructor then. I'd started doing some mum and bub classes in my backyard. I was starting to recognise that I needed an income of my own, but with 3 kids under 4, timing was limited, and managing 3 little kids with 1 at kinder. It was sort of like, what can I do? What money can I make? What can I do to create an income stream at this point?
So what actually were you thinking at that point? Listen, I need to have an exit plan, or
not yet.
No, okay.
No, not yet. So it was. I think I knew things were bad in terms of his business wasn't going well. Nothing was being told to me, but a couple of people had reached out. I'd actually started fitness instructing for someone, funnily enough, a friend of mine at her local gym. And but my husband at the time was also doing some business with them, and he'd owed them some money. And when I'd approached her and said, when am I going to get paid for the work that I'd done? She said, we can't pay you because your husband owes, a certain amount of money. So I'd been doing this fitness instructing to sort of build a little bit of independence around that, but I ended up not being able to receive it because he owed them money. So there was always a lot of stress around money through my marriage.
At that point, what was kind of your internal dialogue? What were the conversations? Well, I'm assuming at this point, were you having conversations with other people, or was it mostly the self-reflection? You're thinking inwardly, shit, what am I going to do?
Inwardly. Yep. And then
So what was
inwardly I was thinking, what am I going to do? I've got 3 little kids. I don't think I was thinking about leaving. I was thinking about how can I help at this point. We'd started doing some marriage counselling, sleeping separate rooms, not having a relationship whatsoever, which we hadn't for years anyway, but we ticked all those boxes like you should do when you know that there's something coming down the barrel and you don't necessarily want it to be that. I was always pretty, like I said, I was always good at everything, yeah? And thinking that I was going to fail at marriage was something that I wasn't willing to do without putting up a fight. So I suppose I glossed over the bad stuff for a long time, but internally I was recognising that I needed to get our shit sorted out. And it was probably about, I think Darcy my daughter would have been, well, how old she's now? So she's 10 now. So it would have been a year after, she would have been a year old. And I had actually reached out to a friend of ours, Jay's and I, her name's Danny Stevens. Her son Finn and my son Finn were going to kinder together at that stage. They're only little, same age, and she was very quiet, Danny. But I think I'd seen on social media or on Facebook or something that she was running this business from home, earning an income from home. I actually approached her at the beach one day. The kids were doing surf groms together, and I walked up to her and I said, "Hey, what's his Arboni thing you were doing?" And she said, it's called Arbon. And I was like, well, can you tell me about it? She goes, well, I'll pop around and have a cuppa. And she talked to me about network marketing, and it blew my mind. I'd never heard anything like it before. I straight away saw the business side of it and went, okay, this is an opportunity for me to make an income at home with kids. If I can teach people how to shop online, no problem at all. I've been doing it with my country road sales for ages before then. I was booking flights online. I was doing everything online already. And so I really got the concept of the business very quickly and very little overhead. So I was like, no overhead, opportunity to make income, boom, I'm all over it. So I started that, I kicked off that business. A year later, I'd reached almost the top of the company. I was making an income stream, a good income stream, and then I had some choices and I could go, okay, what do I want this to look like now?
So you in kind of a, let's say, what's the word? Not organic way, but you were kind of doing the things that, as a financial advisor, I'd probably be encouraging people to start to think about. You were doing it intuitively. Yep. You were starting to sort of line some of those ducks up and understand, okay, what's my potential to earn an income? I'm assuming at that point, and this predates you and I meeting, maybe around that. This is probably very close to where we first met.
It is, yep.
And I think we mentioned, I'm not sure whether it was before we started recording, that like this event in your life is not unique to you.
No.
It's unfortunately something that a lot of women particularly struggle with, and of course men do as well, but women struggle very much with that sense of understanding exactly where they sit in the financial world and contemplating, okay, if I do go my own separate way, then what have I got? What is it going to cost me? What am I going to do with the kids? And getting some structure and organisation around that. Again, you were doing it kind of intuitively, but as someone who advises people on this regularly, having awareness around your situation is the most important. It's not easy.
No.
It's not easy, but it's essential so that you can start to work out, how can I actually be self-sufficient, and how can I be self-sustaining, and how can I be independent?
Well, people often say to me, I don't know how you did it. How did you do what you've done? And we'll talk about a little bit about that as we go on. But it's more like you got to do what you got to do. And I knew from the environment around me, like you said, intuitively, I knew that things were going bad. I knew things were going bad with my husband's business. Look, we had all the stuff, like we had the cars, we had a nice big, 50-something square house. We had, 4 different types of linen I could use on every bed, like all that shit that doesn't matter. Yeah, but I had all that stuff. So from the outside looking in, people were looking at a family that was going pretty good. Yeah. But internally, inside, it was soul destroying. It was a numb environment. There was so much fear. There was so much arguing about income because I knew that things weren't getting paid. I could sense it. At one point we had people come around that were looking for him for money that was owing, like some scary people that you wouldn't necessarily want coming around when you got 3 kids sleeping upstairs. And that's when it triggered. That's for me the moment when I went, shit's getting real. I got to do something. I got to get it together now. And I specifically remember that day my brother came inside and said, there's some people outside. They're looking for your ex-husband, or looking for your husband, and what are you going to do? And I was like, I know exactly what I'm going to do. And thankfully I'd already put in place a few of those things. I'd already got smart about my money. I'd already started having, and I mean, look, I truly believe if I can do it with 3 little kids under 4 in that environment, anybody can do it. If you need to do it enough, if you really need to, you can find a way. There's money out there to be made. You just got to, be open to different ways of earning it. So it was probably, I had one conversation with a friend, only one conversation with a friend about it, saying, I think Darcy would have been, Darcy would have been 2. So my kids were 6, 4 and 2 when I made the decision to finally leave. And my next conversation was with you. So I called you and I said, this is what I'm doing. I've just put the house on the market. Went back, had the conversation with my then husband, said, I'm separating from you. Don't want to be in this environment anymore. I'm leaving. And he was like, pretended that he didn't know it was coming, but it was. But what I did right from the beginning is that I think maybe, J. Burke, the universe brought you to me because you were the very best thing that I could have done at that point. For somebody who'd worked clearly in finance for all these years, I knew that I didn't know what the steps were that I needed to take in order to safeguard my kids and myself moving forward at that point. And I'm not on here today to talk, to badmouth my ex-husband. He had his own stuff going on. He was going through his own stuff. But what I will say is, even in an amicable situation, when your partner and you, have agreed to separation, I don't know how else to put this other to say that I think it's a really stupid thing to do, to just trust that the other person's going to do the right thing by you. And that's the biggest mistake I see women in particular make when they're considering or going through separation and divorce, is they just trust. They will say to you, that I wouldn't imagine that would happen to me. I couldn't imagine he would do that to me. I wouldn't imagine that he wouldn't pay for his kids. So, I can't imagine he'd never pay for, support us. I mean, seriously, it's like a broken record. I hear it so often. And thank God I rang you and I need to get my ducks in a row. I don't know what to do. I don't know. I really didn't know the first thing to do. So I asked for help. And when you say it out loud, it can be something that I'd had all this internal dialogue for many years about. But when you say it out loud, it becomes real, and then you can do something about it. And yes, it was scary and it was awful, but it's scarier and more awful when you don't have any power or any knowledge or any plan. That was way worse.
Yeah, I think that holding on to that, like you said, you held on to that, a lot of that internally, and being scared internally without actually having some support structure around you is the worst. And I think, again, we spoke about this earlier, that anyone thinking that a separation is a simple thing or an easy thing should, reconsider, because it's a very, very, I don't mean reconsider separation, I mean it's a difficult thing, and you should go in with open eyes, knowing that it is difficult and that you do actually need support. So surrounding yourself with support is super important, and I think that it's one of the things that you did, again, probably intuitively, when the kids were very young. And I think the benefit of you having experienced that is that talking about it today, you can actually give people some structure and say, hey, here's some of the things that I did intuitively. Maybe I did them well, maybe I did them poorly, but these were the steps that I took to put myself in a better place, to put myself in a position where I could be truly independent and do my own thing.
Yeah. I think, there's definitely things I stuffed up, but I had already started putting really positive, great role models around me. I had, I was stalking Kari, which led me to you. Another couple of girlfriends. I was very conscious at the time. I didn't tell a lot of people about my situation because I didn't want to have to explain it energetically. That would have been difficult for me. I couldn't be bothered with it. I didn't want people's advice. I tend to never take advice on from people who aren't living a life I want anyway, but I also didn't want to man bash. My kids, their dad was still their dad. As much as we'd had a difficult relationship, I still wanted him involved in their life, but I also knew that with the way he managed money, I would have been a fool to not safeguard the kids and I around that. It just so happened, look, we sold our home. I think I put it on the market. We sold it about a week and a half later. Probably 90% of the income from that house sale went into business debt, that most of which I didn't even know existed. But I agreed to pay that out because we were married at that time. So we were a partnership. I think I came out of it with maybe $50,000 or $60,000. I think that's all I had, nothing else. And I was a primary caregiver to the kids. So we actually ended up renting a place together. He moved in with us for a few months until he could get on his feet because we sold the house so quickly. I didn't want him moving out of the house at Christmas time, it was around that time of year, and I didn't want that associated with – I didn't want the kids to think about Christmas with Dad moving out. So he moved out in the January after Christmas. A couple of weeks later I said, okay, it's time. But, every person's situation and everyone's situation and their family environment and how they're running things is very different, which is why I think getting advice on your personal situation, like I can't tell people what's going to work for them. I can just talk about what worked for me, and I'm able to now thankfully have access to lots of great people and professionals that can help in this space, that can give advice. I think everybody who is considering separation and divorce or going through it should have financial advice. I think every single person who's going through it should have personal insurances to cover things if something bad was to happen. I think that every person should have some type of legal advice about custody and put that in place. I think you just got to do the stuff maybe that you don't want to do.
Yeah. Talking about the legal side of things, and again, I don't want to segue too far into sort of the detail of sort of family law, but one of the things that scares people a lot is that idea that as soon as they start to talk to solicitors, that it's going to, everything's going to be chewed up in legal fees. Now, yes, that potential exists. That potential exists even more so if things are very not amicable. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I encourage everyone to do, and this is always difficult, like I said, it's a difficult situation, but wherever possible, if you can be as amicable as possible mm-hmm. with the discussions that you have around separating. Now, that can be really tough, particularly when we've got emotions of a relationship that's fractured together with a financial situation that in a lot of instances parties don't know where all their money is. Yep. So one of the steps that I've always encouraged people to do is, as a starting point, is to get informed. Like that starting point of lining your ducks up means, okay, let's work out what you've actually got mm-hmm. so that when you actually go to the table, and this is even before you're having conversations with solicitors, if you're coming to the table to actually have a conversation with your partner about, things of a financial nature or separating, that you actually come prepared rather than feeling bamboozled by misinformation, that you're actually aware of what you've got and you can, like you did, you can yep. start to make some more informed personal decisions about what you do.
And it's also a time when people are going through that they feel a lot of shame and guilt. Yep. So they want to feel like they're doing the right thing by the other person, and that can really impede on that as well. So I think the sooner you can make it, and we talked about this before, the sooner you can make it a business transaction, think about it like a business transaction, take the emotion out of it, the better. I was really fortunate. I got advice from you, and I financially separated a year before I was divorced. So my financial separation went through, had orders put in place. That all was done before my divorce was finalised.
I think one of the common mistakes that I see is that people leave a very loose end with the wrapping up of the financial separation. Like you said, you were financially separated and had a delineated line between your assets before you were, you'd formally divorced, and a lot of people leave that hanging. Go, we'll kind of work it out later.
Doesn't work.
He'll continue to support me here, and I'll help him there. What ultimately happens in 80 or 90% of cases, that once another relationship is started, there's a further breakdown of the amicable nature. If it was amicable before, as soon as there's a third party or a fourth party involved, that tends to go to shit.
It dissipates totally.
Quickly.
Very quickly, yep.
And again, all of this is really difficult stuff. It's difficult stuff that's dealt with at an emotional time, like having conversation with people when they're at the height of their emotion, talking about things that they've probably not spoken about before, cash flow, budgeting, income, debt. There's a lot to carry, and that's why, as you said, getting some support, whether it be through a friend who's been through a similar circumstance, whether it be going and seeking some advice. You do need to surround yourself, like you did, with good people, good role models, people that can actually point you in the right direction, and also pull you up when you're heading down the wrong path.
Yeah, I think that's what I've been maybe subconsciously, I've done that a lot, is the people that I have around me, like you, Jay, and other friends, other girlfriends. Carrie's one, Danny would be one, another friend of mine, Amy. They're people that don't listen to my BS if I'm talking BS. Like, they wouldn't allow that they wouldn't indulge me if I was, if they didn't agree with what I was trying to say or get across. So, yeah, there was definitely having great support people that would have my back no matter what, but also pull me up if I was like, hang on a minute, Tam, that doesn't sound, do you think that's fair? Do you think that's the right thing to do? And there was no real, I don't really remember. I think I got upset the first time I came and spoke to you because it's the first time I was really talking about stuff out loud. But from that point forward, I don't think I really had, leaving here and having a plan in place was literally the best thing I could have done. Particularly later on in life, a few years later actually, but yeah, and then when I think we'd been separated about 6 months, and my ex had found a new partner, met someone new, and I had about a month later. That's when things that were sort of going along okay at that point 100% took a downward spiral, and particularly around, so we had done a financial separation in terms of assets and income. So anything that I earned from that point was mine. Anything he earned was his, but also that came down to debt as well. Any debt he incurred from that point was his. Any debt I incurred was mine. But things like paying child support for the children had just been at that point, up until that point, just a verbal agreement. So he would just contribute what he could when he could, and I had the kids with me 100% of the time, and they might see him on the weekend or every second weekend or something at that point. So there was no structure around that, and I suppose it went on probably, if I look back, it probably went on for close to 2 years, where I was, I suppose, a creditor that he could decide that he wanted to pay or not pay when he wanted to. I just became someone who, I think it must be difficult sometimes. I'd met someone new, he'd met someone new, and when he'd have to, when he would give me money or put money into the account, he would think of it as though it's money for me, not money to support the children. And for 2 years, I think we just went backwards and forwards with him saying he was going to pay for things and contribute. And in the end, I just said, no more. I'm not doing it anymore. It caused me more stress having to deal with it. So we ended up doing some mediation, but it ended up we got our own. I got my family lawyer that helped me with the consent order around finances. She then helped me in terms of working out a parenting order, which we got placed as a custody order, so it's a legal document. We could not have any communication 2 years after our separation whatsoever that was going to have a positive outcome to it. So we just decided to let the lawyers do it instead. Probably the best decision I'd made. Mediation was a nightmare for me, works for some people. I hated it, was anxious before I turned up, hated sitting across the table from someone that I felt wasn't telling the truth. And it just was worse. And I would leave always feeling awful. And I thought, do you know what? I don't need to do this to myself anymore. I ended up having a family lawyer. We just got the parenting, and to this day, that parenting arrangement is in place. There was a period of time where the kids were with me full time. They didn't see their dad for a while. He went through a stage where he wasn't able to have the children with him. He wasn't well. So the kids were with me the whole time. But on occasion, I would take the kids to see him supervised, and that went on for about 12 months. So, yeah, in terms of actual child support, that's probably the thing that I'm most passionate about talking about with women, because, you know what, the way the system works, it can be manipulated both ways. People can probably pretend that they're earning less than what they are so that they don't have to pay child support, and then maybe it could work on the flip side where people are saying that they're earning more and they're not. So it can work both ways, whether or not you're the primary carer and someone's owing you the money or you owe the money. You can manipulate the system. It's very simple to manipulate the system. And even now to this day, in terms of child support, I get $0 per month from my ex-husband to support the children. He pays nothing at all towards the financial raising of them. He does, however, have the children every second weekend for 2 days and a week during the school holidays as part of the parenting order. But in terms of financially contributing to raising them, the kids are now 14, 12 and 10. We're talking about schooling costs, uniforms, food, housing. I mean, food. I'll say food again. You know what it's like, Jay, 5 kids, food. All of those expenses that you would have assumed that would have been helped out with aren't. And I think if I wasn't in the financial position that I'm in now and have planned for that earlier, it would be a very different Tam Shiels sitting here having a talk to you today.
Your experience with your separation was obviously a fairly pivotal part in your life, but it's not the only one that sort of presented some challenges to you financially and personally. Let's fast forward just a little bit. I'll let you tell the story in the lead up. How much longer after you were separated did you receive a diagnosis, a health diagnosis, and what was it?
So in 2019, after about 6 months, so it was about Feb 2019, I started to feel a little bit unwell, had some chest pain, sore left breast, was starting to feel like I knew something was off. Health-wise, I was pretty good. Like I was running and my body, like if you'd see me down the street, you'd say, gee, she's fit and healthy. Like I looked good, eating right, doing all the right things, wasn't smoking. I've been off the darts for 15 years now, no more ciggies, rarely drank, and just was living a conscious, healthy life in those aspects. But in terms of adrenal stress, still worrying about money, still worrying about my kids' future, still worrying about, at that time, my ex-husband had some mental health stuff go on. So I had the full physical and emotional, I suppose, responsibility for the kids. So that was a lot of stress that I wasn't dealing with. So my body said, hang on a minute, Tam, it's time to slow down. Here's a red flag and you need to do something about it.
So this is 2019. When did you separate?
I separated, I think it was 2016.
So about 3 years
Post
post that.
Yeah.
And you had your Arbonne business.
Mm-hmm.
Were you doing anything else work-wise?
Just doing a bit of fitness instructing, but that was it.
Had Ferg come onto the scene yet or not?
Yeah, so I'd met Ferg. Ferg is he would call me his current partner. I met the cheeky Irishman in a Las Vegas bar back in 2016.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think I must have separated. I think I separated 2015 and I met Ferg in 2016. That's right. Yep. And And yeah, so we'd been dating, but we had a long distance relationship. So he's from Ireland, he's from Dublin, Ireland, but I met him in Vegas. He just started a business over there, and we met the old fashioned way at a bar, and we'd started dating, but travelling between Vegas, Bowen Heads and Dublin for a couple of years. That was probably, looking back, that was a big stress too. Every time I would go and visit him, I would be missing the kids, and every time I was with the kids, I was missing him. So there was a lot of stresses that I don't think I was managing, and that for me is, looking back, I'm like, that's why I was diagnosed with breast cancer in August of 2019. I had noticed, like I said, some changes in my body, and after about 6 months of being told it was just hormonal, don't worry about it, you're totally fine, I discovered a lump in my left breast, which turned out to be triple negative breast cancer, which is the most aggressive form. I found it very early because I was quite health conscious at the time. Found it very early, but
did you find it yourself, or was it a mammogram?
Yeah, no, I found it myself. So it wasn't didn't show on a mammogram. Didn't even show on a mammogram after I found the lump. It only found on ultrasound later, but you could feel it at this stage. So it popped up. I could feel it. Went in. I remember having the biopsy done, and I actually remember going back to the GP to get the results, and I'd taken the kids in the car. Kids were in the car park. Don't tell anybody. The kids are in the car park. And I said, I'll just pop in. Turn the radio on. You'll be fine. Don't fight with your brother.
Leave the air conditioner on.
Put the window down. And I ran in and thought I was just going to get they were going to say, yeah, it's fine. And she sat me down, the GP sat me down. She said, I've got some very bad news. And I said, well, that's not yours to determine. You get to tell me what the news is. You don't get to say whether it's good or bad. And she said, well, you've got triple negative breast cancer. So in that moment, rather than being totally freaked out, I remember I didn't cry at that stage. Well, the kids were in the car outside illegally. But all I remember is going, okay, now I need a plan. And so that's what I did. A friend of mine was working at the Geelong Breast Clinic at that stage. I just messaged her straight away, hey, my diagnosis came through, got breast cancer. Who's the best oncologist? Who's the best surgeon? Who should I be seeing? Who should I be getting my referrals to now in Geelong? She gave me that information. Like Kim Prince was my general surgeon, who I saw first. Just saw her last week actually for my 3-year all clear check, yay. But it was because I wasn't worried about finances that I didn't think about getting the best care, I think, at that point. I was like, I just need to have the best people look after me and get through this. I also had a Chinese medicine doctor. I had a functional surgeon. I had, I was able to spend time and money on things that really I knew were going to help me through that. So diagnosed in the August, ended up having a double mastectomy and a reconstruction in October. I had a flight booked to go to Dublin in December. Actually, it was like the 20th of November, and I said to my surgeon, I need to be on that plane. I'm going over to see Burke for Christmas. She said, Tammy, I think that's a bit ridiculous. I was like, whatever. So had the surgery, was on a plane a couple of weeks later. Totally fine. Been fine ever since, 3 years later. But I do remember when I told you, Jay, because I was diagnosed and it was about 3 days later, we had to go up to the Gold Coast for a conference through my Arbonne business. And I hadn't told Kari. Danny knew, who was with me, and Megan, who was my friend who worked at the Geelong Breast Clinic. So all these people that I'd met through the Arbonne business. And I remember being up there, I had to go to an event, and I had started doing a few things already. Like when I knew that something was off with my body, I'd started to do lots of sort of nutritional things. I'd been fasting and lots of things. I remember, Jay, I saw you at a coffee shop. I was having something to eat and he looked at me and said, what's wrong with you? And I said, nothing's wrong with me. Before I'd said anything, you said, there's something different. And I was like, I'm totally fine. And then when you walked off, I said to Danny, have you said something to him? Because he knows something's going on. And it was that night I'd gone to an event and I came back to your room with Danny and spoke to you and Kari and said, this is the case. I've got breast cancer. Kari got upset. You looked at me and said, okay, what can we do? And I said, I don't know, what can we do? So in that moment, I remember looking at you and saying, I think we've got a plan for this.
Yeah, we definitely had a plan. I think it's funny, well, not funny, but funny how circumstances lead almost, they appear as though they happen by accident, but they're obviously by design. Having a plan is for those exact instances. Like, things aren't a problem until they're a problem. Like, things aren't a problem with your health until it's a problem with your health. Same with family law, same with estate planning. Things aren't a problem until they're a problem, and you need to get your shit together. And one of the things that I suppose that would have probably been an easy thing to overlook when you did separate was that we need to, get rid of all of your expenses. Some of your expenses related to insurances that, as a financial advisor, you look at a single mum with 3 kids, you have to have. And having that conversation with you around the need to, you've got to protect yourself. You're going to have to rebuild your assets, but you've got some insurance there that we need to maintain in the event that something was to happen to you, either death, disability, loss of income. We need to make sure that not only you're okay, but also that you've got capacity to continue to look after the kids. And those things don't happen by accident. And being in this game for 20 odd years now, unfortunately or fortunately, whichever way you want to look at it, we've seen a lot of our clients, and also people that come to us who haven't been clients, that are in very different situations. Those that have put a plan in place and have that sort of insulation of protection around them, and then you've got those that thought that it will never happen to me and I don't really need to prepare. So 2019, the breast cancer diagnosis, you had the surgery, you've been 3 years clear of that, but if we backtrack a little bit, you did have some insurance in place, which was able to really take away all of the financial and probably emotional burden of everything you were having to deal with at that time.
Changed my life, like literally changed my life. That preparation. I mean, I've talked about this for years with my network marketing business. Even like prepare for impact. Like have something in place just in case. You just never know what's around the corner. And having insurance, I remember times, Jay, though. Like I remember thinking sometimes, like I remember it being a significant chunk every month of that I'd have to pay in insurances, and I was going,
maybe you should cancel it.
Maybe that's something that I should, could I cancel that? Or, maybe I get on a lower bent, like maybe I can cut part of it down. And I was just this inner knowing going, you know what? That's a safety net. That's preparing for impact. I'll do anything I have to do to make sure that I continue to pay that, if nothing else. Thank God.
Yeah, and I think it is like most things. It's complicated, and there are, different circumstances where maybe, looking at people's insurance and seeing that they've got more than they need, and they can actually, reduce some of that cost. But it's really case by case. It's just so important. The awareness of what you've got to begin with is so important. If you have no idea what you've got, if you're going into it blind, then good luck making a decision about whether you should keep stuff or you shouldn't keep stuff, or what this insurance actually is. What does it cover me for? If I cancel it now, can I reinstate it later? It's just a minefield of things to consider. Having some support, having people around you that can say, it's okay, it's all right. This is the stuff we need to keep and why.
Yep.
This is the stuff we can modify and why. Having a plan. And
that's the plan. And when you have that, particularly with something with income protection, something, total and permanent disability, it was a moment. And I remember having this and I remember looking at you, Jay, and said, I think I've got insurance for this, don't I? And he said, yeah. And I cannot tell you, as a mum that had been battling for, like literally battling, hustling for 3 years to just keep my head above water, it was such a relief. Being paid insurance money back to my family that would not only help me through that I could have the very best care that I wanted, but also set me up in so many other financial ways later and I'm in a position now where I just don't have that worry anymore. And that's not something that I know for a fact that that stress and financial stress is probably one of the worst stresses that you can have, because I've experienced it. And not having that is life-changing. It's profound. And I think by getting that advice and putting that plan in place and recognising that it could happen, anything could happen at any time, and you need to be prepared for that, is probably the single most important thing that anybody can do. And I'm not just talking about people who are going through separation and divorce. I'm talking about anybody at any time, I believe, need to have some type of safety plan in place. Like do you know what your assets are? Do you have your wills worked out? Coming from a single parent point of view, a single mum point of view, what the hell was going to happen to my kids? Like, I wasn't getting paid child support. I didn't think that was about to miraculously start happening when I got sick. It didn't. I didn't get extra support. My ex-husband didn't say, I recognise this is stressful for you. Here's some money for the kids. None of that happened. So the responsibility was mine, but thankfully I had got the advice when I needed to, and I'd put things in place. We'd put things in place, and, life's been pretty bloody good. I don't want to say it was great having cancer, but I was saying it wasn't, I don't look at it in a really negative way. I went, it's a bit of a shake-up for me. Had to start changing how I lived.
That's one of the things, if I had to sort of describe how you dealt with cancer from the outside looking in, you always had a very, very positive attitude and almost refused to let the negativity of the diagnosis even really exist. Like both, you were very much focused on, what can I actually take control of? What are the things that are in my control? And listening back to all of the things that you've done in your life, from when you left school, went to Cairns, to how you prepared for the separation, how you looked to manage your kids, how you dealt with your cancer diagnosis, you've always taken control and been willing to do what needs to be done, even in the face of difficulty, to do the best for you and your family. And maybe that's a personality trait, maybe that's a skill you have, but I think that it's also worth telling people out there that maybe don't feel as though they've got that same personality trait, or they're not that skilled, or they don't have that support network, that you can acquire those things. You can reach out and get support around the areas that you're not great at. Just because Tammy was able to find a way through this myriad of sort of family and financial hurdles, it doesn't mean you can't as well. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy. In fact, it's almost guaranteed not to be. But isn't it funny that some of the things that are the most challenging in your life, that cause you the most grief in the moment, you can look back on later and say, hey, that actually formed who I am.
Totally. I think now that I'm the very best person in the world right now to help the woman that I used to be. And that woman that I used to be was considering separation, recognising that I was in a loveless marriage, an environment I didn't want to be in, an unsafe environment for my family, understanding that I needed to have a plan in place, wasn't too sure where to go, but then started looking towards that, started to create a plan and put myself in the way of people that could help me with that. And there are a lot of people. I mean, I could talk about men and women, but I'm specifically talking to women here. There are a lot of women right now who I know for a fact are in relationships, in situations that might be unsafe, that they really unsafe, unhealthy, not fulfilling to them, and they literally don't know what to do. There is no guide, there is no how to, there's nothing, there's no guidebook that you go, okay, this is step one of what I need to do. And if I was going to survey 50 women, I could tell you right now that probably 49 out of 50 would say that they've stayed, and these are women who are separated or divorced now. 49 out of 50 would say that they stayed longer than what they would have stayed if they'd known what to do, or if they were financially free or had financial choice over over their own life. They would have made different choices. And that's why I think this is so significant that, if I was going to offer you $1 million tomorrow to drop into your bank account, what difference would you make to your life today? And if the first thing that comes to your head is like, get the hell out of here, then it might be time to start looking at ways of doing that. You start to put some things in place. There's no reason why you can't.
Well, this is probably a pretty good way to round out the conversation today, Tammy, and probably a good segue into, because I don't think we've mentioned it yet, about how your own business and conversations and consulting around this area have evolved to your current project, the project that hasn't quite released yet, but that you're working on, given the passion you have around particularly women empowering themselves to get their shit together, get a plan in place and prepare for impact for things like separation, being in relationships maybe that are not healthy for them. Mm-hmm. So what are you doing with yourself at the moment?
So at the moment I am currently creating, which we're going to be launching in October, a brand new community. It'll be a membership community for women who are considering or going through separation and divorce, or maybe they've just on the other side of that and not feeling like they're empowered or thriving. But I suppose out of the back end of all of this is my mission, I now believe, is to help women who are transitioning through that entire process, moving through that process, how to do it in a way that's going to give them the most positive, empowered movement through that. Not be a victim of their circumstance, and instead come out of it like I have. I've got an amazing life. Might not be the life that the listeners want right now, but a version of that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm grateful every single day. I have a fantastic, beautiful, healthy family. I've got a healthy body. I have income. And now I have knowledge and opportunity to help other people who are going through this process. So that's what I'm creating. So the I Am Tam podcast kicks off in October. And that's going to be, I'm also an integrative nutrition wellness coach. So it's under that banner is not just, getting the right financial advice and legal advice, but also what are you doing for your own health? Are you taking care of yourself through this? Because like we were talking before, it's a really stressful time.
Yeah. And just to be clear, you're not giving people financial advice or legal advice, but what you are doing is creating a community and being a conduit through which you can direct people to the services that they actually need.
Yep. So the idea of the community, so the actual community itself is going to be called I Do to Divorce, which we had a little bit of a bit of a laugh about before. So I do, obviously being I do when you get married, but I do to divorce. So trying to sort of remove a bit of the stigma around being separated and divorced, and encourage people to be empowered through that process. Because I believe if you come through it in a positive way, it's also going to, particularly if you're a single parent, that is going to that's going to help everybody around you, and that includes your kids, move through that process. If you talk to my kids today, they wouldn't think that their life was any different to anybody else's. They don't think that it was a bad thing being raised by a single mum. They just think it's just normal. My oldest son told me, he's had a basic upbringing the other day. I was like a little offended by basic because I've never had basic.
Did you have him define basic?
I did. He goes, well, just normal, mum. Yeah, just normal. So
it's probably
a good thing.
A good thing, yeah.
Yeah. So when I look at it and I go, okay, well, after everything that I've just spoken about, to have a 14-year-old son that says, well, we've just got a normal life, mum, he doesn't have a normal life. He lives in bloody Barwon Heads in a everything. He lives in a bit of the bubble. My kids live in a bit of the bubble, which I don't mind either. But we have really an extraordinary life. We have a fantastic life. We travel. We have so many opportunities and just a great lifestyle. So I think, through my pain, I suppose my pain and my challenges born from that is my now ability to be able to direct people to the people that can help them. And you, Jay, are one of those people. I think it's super important for anyone going through that to get in touch with somebody that can help them, make an appointment. What's the worst thing that can happen? That's how I think about it. Get informed, then make a decision. So the community will be, membership monthly, and people can come in and come out of it as they please. But in there'll be resources. There's a guide on how to move through separation and divorce in an empowered way and thriving. There'll be lots of stuff in there about your health, taking care of yourself, interviews, talking to people like yourself or to family lawyers, and things that you can access. It's like a sort of a go-to portal, I suppose, for people that are thinking about it or going through it. They can come to and have affordable insight and information for where they need to go to next. Yeah, sort of a one-stop shop.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt that the topics that people that would be subscribing to I Do To Divorce, they're kind of gnarly topics. There's stuff that get people worked up, and maybe you've got making it as inclusive and as relatable as you possibly can is going to be really important.
Yeah.
Like making sure, because to be honest, it's not that sexy and not that exciting to think, hey, I'm going to go and see a financial advisor, I'm going to go and see a family lawyer. It's not the sexiest area to be involved in, but it's super important. And I think listen, credit to you for taking your experience and I suppose distilling it down to something that's going to be relatable to every person, that every person that's gone through a similar circumstance as you, they'll have the opportunity not to think, hey, I've got to go and see a financial advisor straight up, or I've got to go and see a family lawyer. They can actually listen to someone that's actually experienced what you have, and maybe many other people who I'm sure you'll have on that have experienced similarly, and again, give them some confidence and some reassurance that they're actually moving in the right direction. And I'm sure you would agree that this conversation is not a man-hating conversation at all.
No.
This is just about people individually giving them the opportunity to take personal responsibility and say, hey, no one else is probably going to do this for you. And like you said a few times, listen, I looked around and realised that, hey, there's only one person who can make a change here and control this, and it's you.
Yep.
So if you can, however you do it, if you can give people that the opportunity for them to take ownership, I think that's a great thing, and do it in a supportive way, in a loving way, and a way that they can then get the resources they need. So hats off to you, Tam.
Thanks, mate.
Where else can people find you on socials?
You can find me at Tam_Shiels on Instagram. Tam Shiels was already taken. That's what Jay was about to say. I just stopped. Tam_Shiels on Instagram, or just Tam Shiels on Facebook as well. But Instagram is where you'll find me the most. New website's going to be launched as well with everything on there. I currently do have a podcast called the Inner Pink Fit Podcast, but we're going to be transitioning over to I Am Tam in the coming months.
So if people want to hear Inner Pink Fit, where can they find it?
They can find it on all of the usuals, so Spotify, iTunes, all that jazz. So at Inner Pink Fit, if you want to jump on and have a look at that as well. We've sort of we're closing down Inner Pink Fit as a business model at the moment, and moving more towards Tam Shiels, or I Am Tam, and I Do To Divorce. But you still can find everything on there. If you go into Tam Shiels, you'll be able to see about the Inner Pink Fit podcast.
Awesome. Tam, is there anything else you want to say before we close things out?
Take responsibility, ladies. Thanks, Jay.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you're keen to understand more about how financial advice could benefit you, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Burke Britain FP, or Google Burke Britain Financial Partners. Check out our client reviews, testimonials, and make a time to meet one of our certified financial planners by clicking Book Now on our website. Thanks for listening.
Any information contained in this podcast is of a general nature only. No account was taken as to the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. Therefore, before making any decision, listeners should consider the appropriateness of any information with regard to their particular objective, financial situation, needs, and seek independent advice from a licensed professional specific to their circumstances.
All right, hit it.
That translates to, don't be a moron and act on what some random person says on a podcast. Take personal responsibility, do your homework, ask questions, and speak to an actual human that knows what they're talking about before you do anything. PP Financial Solutions Proprietary Limited, trading as Burke Britain Financial Partners, are authorised representatives of AMP Financial Planning Limited, AFS, licence number 232706.